yeah, should I make some brief comment? Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I feel it.
No, so I'm very, very grateful to Gary Smith for organizing this meeting, and I think it's really fascinating. My background is I'm basically a clinician, but I'm retired, and I know I have worked in different medical disciplines. Neurology was one of my majors, and also psychiatry. And I'm so disgusted, so to say, that nobody is talking about therapy. The media and all the commissions for the government in Austria, Vienna, this is my present location, they just talk about now vaccination and so on, and show the pictures of the dead people, okay, or dying people. And I'm so angry because I was also working at intensive care for 2 years in neurology, and I think there's a very great need for help for understanding the disease, and we have something to be explained, and this is why do we have about 50% of people who are infected but are asymptomatic. And I know in my personal environment some people who have just had a very small common cold, so to say, and suddenly they heard, this was in March, they heard, okay, there's COVID around, or the SARS-CoV-2, and I just call it Corona to make it briefly, and they found they had they were seropositive, yeah, they had antibodies. So they said, oh, I had COVID, but I had no real symptoms. So on the other hand, my wife is working in a clinical unit, and one of the nurses, 50 years old, got COVID 4 weeks ago, and she has the myocarditis right now. She's really a fighter, yeah. She's an intensive care, person, and now she cannot breathe and so on. She's not a psychosomatic case, but she's really severely damaged by this disease. So this is my motivation, because I think we should think, and this is was so fascinating with the very fast response from Gary, and reading the papers, that we should have a systemic view, going back to the old physiology, not avoiding biochemistry. The opposite. We need biochemistry and go up and up, level by level, to understand the whole functions of the whole body, because now they know that the brain is also affected. Now they know that the gastrointestinal tract, I mean, it's more and more evidences. It's not so new, and we knew it already in April. And therefore, I think it's very, very urgent to integrate clinical knowledge, but they have no time. Yeah, I have a group at the Bertalanffy Center, a Zoom group from Germany and Austria a little bit. But the clinicians in the summer, I said, come together. We have to prepare. We have to think over all the different symptoms, the stages of infection. And they said, yeah, but now we need the holidays. We are so exhausted from the spring and the early summer. So now in the so to say late spring, they were already fighting for the beds and making the triage already. So they are really near the burnout. So this is the situation. And therefore I'm highly motivated to find some persons who are competent in different fields of medicine, to build the big picture. Yeah, this is what I want to say, and this is what I was sending you via email. That there's the vague idea. I just made a sketch about the problem. What is the explanandum? What would we really like to know? And which everybody says, yes, we don't know why there's this bifurcation. And Jennifer was sending me this nice slide where you see this bifurcation. There are some people who are really severe ill, and there are some mild symptoms and so on. So this is very interesting. What's going on and what's the point of no return? It's really a dynamical disease in the sense of Glass and Mackay from Montreal. Yeah, there is some dynamics to be understood. Yeah. And yeah, and Eugene was giving nice inputs, and so I'm so happy that this happens, and I hope really that we find some compromise. And I'm not interested. I'm a fan of Berta Lamfi with this concept of dynamic equilibrium, which he called Fließgleichgewicht. Yeah, and this can be understood as the result of opposing forces in the organism, like activators of any function and inhibitors of any function. And all the papers I read from Gary and Eugene and so, which is showing the RAS system. Yeah, so sorry for my English. I'm not so it's not my everyday language. So I think I really feel very well in this community. I did not find it in the German community. There is one guy. He was working in the institute in McGill. Uwe Anderheiden, he was making models on the immune system, and he was working with Glass and Mackay on this concept of dynamical diseases. And he has an immunologist, and I have this little group, but it's very hard to motivate them to do something. So okay, that's what I want to say. And I'm very happy if we could publish something which has individual differential perspectives plus integrative perspective, because we have to demonstrate both. Yeah, there's no criticism against differential and microscopic or molecular scopic views. And as Gary said already, we need a broader scope. Yeah, and additionally, and go down. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. So it's a dialectic process of epistemology, of systemic understanding of the organism. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Felix. Who would like to go next?
Really good. I was going to say thanks, Felix, for that. And your English is amazing, actually, for a second language. It's my first language and I can't even speak it. But I'm from New Zealand, so maybe that explains some of it. Thank you for your passion and just talking about the burnout, because I think that was happening in Melbourne. We only had about 6 weeks of quite severe community disease, but we were trying to get physicians to go down to St. Vincent's and the Alfred in Melbourne. And I actually looked into it, but then I had to quarantine myself coming back for another 2 weeks. So it just didn't work for my family, but the physicians were really getting quite burnt out. And that was a very short time. So I don't know, and probably the nurses as well, but I wasn't there. So I'm not quite sure how they cope with that. But I think that is a really big problem. And I think that also, I agree. I don't think the vaccine is really going to be all that helpful for a lot of countries and a lot of people, particularly those who aren't wealthy. And depending on which vaccine we end up getting, in Australia, the one that has to be stored at -70 will not be very helpful, apart from the hospital setting. So I don't think we're out of the woods at all. And I think there'll be another pandemic that comes also. So we kind of need to either help with the current one or make sure that we never get into this situation again. I've just sent a little, Richard and I have been really upset about the whole thing since March, and we have been calling for a national approach and for people with physiology and pharmacology background to come together and to do things. And the government kept funding small little research groups that were very tribal and very siloed, that basically were doing what they do outside of COVID, which is to not talk to anyone about their ideas and get some grant funding money into a small project and publish it in a journal that nobody reads. And it's all very good for them, but it wasn't really pulling together the wealth of expertise. And I guess if I just come back to the renin-angiotensin aspect, Richard and Eugenie have been publishing on renin-angiotensin since the 80s. And there are
But
big
longer than that, Jennifer, I hate to say.
well, maybe earlier, but for a very long time. And we have a big institute in Melbourne that does a lot of work in this area, and it was clear that that was a key signalling pathway that was involved in the morbidity and mortality, and yet we couldn't even get it together in Australia to get this group in Melbourne to lead a response. So I think we're feeling really upset and frustrated that we're in this position. And I just sent you a link to, it's a pretty crap paper, but it's the Sydney Morning Herald. And I know that it looks like we've stooped to a very low level going to the media, but I think Richard and I felt that we were going to do whatever we needed to do to try and get the dominant narrative changed, and for scientists, and particularly those that work in the areas that are important, the systems that are involved in COVID, which, as you rightly point out, Felix, and most systems, including the brain, the reservoir in the brain, and or the lipid, and also the gut. But pretty much it's a multi-organ disease, to try and really just change the way we're thinking about this, and to try and change the leadership. So we have done a few things, but they've sort of been futile as well. We get a bit of interest for a few days from the media, and then it's all gone and nothing changes. So I don't know. I think I was thinking once I got your email, Eugenie and Bevan and people, that maybe we need to go back to the science community and say, okay, we haven't really done very well with leadership in our own community, and rather than trying to get the public on board, maybe we just need to get the science community on board and build a coalition that way that might be more effective than trying to bring the public on board. So I was really delighted, Eugenie, when you put us all in contact, and also for Gary's systems approach. I was pretty chuffed to find out your background, Gary, and also Felix, you've done a really amazing job giving us a structure, I think, to think about how we might put this forward to the scientific community. So thank you for that. So I guess I'm just saying that also I'm very grateful and really keen to use today's meeting to think about not just the science, but also how we can raise the profile of the science into something that will channel the research into a systems approach and hopefully get some therapeutics out. I feel like I've hogged the floor, but I'm just going to say one more quick thing. There's a very amazing infectious diseases physician called David Fedson, who's from the US, from NIH. He's retired now. He's in France, and he's been publishing quite a bit. And he has just published in a journal an observational study in Belgium on ARBs and ACE inhibitors plus or minus statins, and the results are pretty amazing. He's also submitting something else to the Lancet today, actually. So we're starting to get observational data out, and he found it very difficult because the journals only wanted randomized control studies. So he spent a lot of his time trying to convince even his own colleagues that there's a huge amount of benefit from actually using the data that we can observe to actually get on with it, rather than doing a 2,000 patient randomized controlled study that would take 2 years for us to get out and a lot of money. So if you've got some spare time, look at Fedson, or if you want his work, I'm happy to send you the stuff that's been published. Thank you.
That'd be great, Jennifer. I mean, I think one of the most telling stories was a recent Lancet report where they actually used recombinant ACE2 in the therapy and tracked the changes in the angiotensin peptides. And it was just what you would say would happen if you had knocked out ACE2. You know, they did it before, they gave recombinant ACE2, then they gave recombinant ACE2. It was a single case. They had all these peptides, and it was just beautiful. And that is a guy from your territory. I'll help Kirsty, Marco. Marco, what's Marco's other name? He's Attaquant.
Yeah, I don't know how to say his last name. Polkovich. Gary would know him as well from...
Do you know, he's involved with the actual assay of peptides using a system they've developed. And he got teed up with somebody else. It's a Lancet report, and it is absolutely beautiful. The other guy who I've read a lot about is a very powerful American guy, and he's had a lot of Chinese workers with him, Joseph Penninger. And I think...
Penninger.
Penninger.
Ah, yeah. He's from Austria and now in Canada. Is it this guy?
Oh, Canada. I'm sorry. He is in Canada. You're right.
Vancouver. Yeah. It's a very good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot coming out, or has had a lot coming out. But I think there's a bigger issue that we're facing, and that is that a lot of the drugs, I mean, dexamethasone finally crept in because people were so sick. But a lot of the drugs that are used in the renin-angiotensin system, other potential drugs, are they're now generic drugs. So they're of no commercial value. Whereas, you know, the media is full of the guy whose vaccine hits the thing is going to be a billionaire. And so it's being driven by economics, and it's not being driven by consideration of individuals and therapeutics. Yeah. And when we look at repurposing drugs, we have to bring back a lot of the basic pharmacology and physiology to understand, you know, and to design things. And I agree, we're totally lacking that in Australia. I mean, I think my only contact with one of the people working in this area is to ask a question at last week's High Blood Pressure Council.
I think you could write a paper, Eugenie, on capitalism run amok, because I think that's like one of the other sort of elephants in the room is that this focus on commercial gain and making money has kind of been in there in the background as well. Whereas I think what we're looking at here is really a market failure, because these are off-patent drugs. No one's going to make any money. So I think it really is something that the government needs to step into, or somebody to fund it as well. So I think there are a few other background issues that are not so related to the science, but they certainly tie into the systems approach, which are the sort of political and social aspects that have really affected why we haven't been able to have the science working. Anyway, that's just my thought. We could probably get someone else to write that bit.
Jenny, it's Richard here. And Eugenie, if I can just pick up on the repurposing, dexamethasone was discovered in 1957. So it's certainly been an incredibly valuable drug and the most obvious one. But in terms of repurposing, I think what's happened, if we go to a higher order level in terms of looking at, by higher order, I mean looking at systems, what you see happening in therapeutics and pharmacology is a slow recognition that there are very few examples of any therapeutic agent that has one action.
Yes.
And that's understandable. There are 100,000 proteins in a cell, and the idea that one small molecule is only going to interact with one part of one protein.
Well, a monoclonal antibody will, of course.
Yeah, and so the whole notion is now slowly being turned on its head, so that people are now actively looking for multiple actions of existing therapeutics. But some of those systems high order issues to me are the following. Therapeutics, we have by and large ignore its key value. And the historic key value of therapeutics has almost always been as a bridging agent from an acute setting to one that buys you time before you can bring in other interventions, be they surgical or be they whatever. That principle applies so much in a pandemic. In other words, the idea of bringing in an agent that will buy you time before you can get vaccinations online and implemented and so on and so forth, been largely ignored. That's number one. Number two, we've paralysed ourselves by this deep vertical integration in our disciplines, where a virus ignores disciplines. A virus doesn't care whether someone's talking about molecular biology, cell biology, physiology, or whatever. A virus does what a virus does. And that's invariably horizontal integration. And Gary, that's where the systems analysis and Felix that you were talking about is just so powerful, because horizontal integration is all around systems analysis. And frankly, that's what biology and health's about. And we've ignored it. And the final comment I'd make is almost like, unlike any other science that I know, health research has by and large played down observational data. If you look at meteorology, for example, it's built on observational data. People base their lives around that data in terms of what I'm going to wear tomorrow, or whether a plane should fly in a certain place tomorrow, and so on and so forth. And so observational data in human health, for reasons I just do not understand, over 2 or 3 decades has been played down, and randomized control trials have been played up, whereas you'd actually want to play up both of those things. And so, and really what Jenny was referring to in terms of the Belgian study that's just out now around the statins and RAS inhibitors, is just a beautiful observational study. So Jenny, they're the things. We've ignored the bridging feature of therapeutics. We've imprisoned ourselves in vertical integration in our disciplines, and we've ignored observational data. And I can think of no worse way of going into a pandemic than with those three.
I'm making some notes as well. Sorry, Gary, just so that because these are really good comments. I think you're right. So we've got, and then I think all those other things like the capital, I mean, we don't want to make it sound as if we're a bunch of rabid communists or anything. I mean, that would be fun. But I think that capitalism has, and the commercial focus has not really helped this whole agenda either. But maybe we'll get a political scientist or someone to help us with that bit if we go down that track. But thank you.
So are we planning a campaign to sort of try and re-educate how people approach therapeutics? Or are we planning a strategy for treatment? I guess that's the question I'll direct to Gary.
Well, from the sounds of it, what we need to do in order to make the change is to do both of those things. You know, again, you know, to take a systemic approach and to tackle the problem from several different angles. I mean, Felix had in mind, you know, a high impact paper, having a series of coherent articles in a journal, having a campaign, thinking about, you know, the overall approach that we need in terms of the treatment, the strategy of the treatment. These are all things that we need as you know, a set of ingredients to have what we need to be a systemic effect, because doing any one of those things individually is probably not going to work. You probably need to use those things in combination.
Yeah.
I've got Felix's email as a PDF. Do you want me to put that up? Because it had a great long list of things that was really good. So I'll have to open it. Oh, it's sideways.
I don't think Bevan's had a turn at speaking, has he? Hey, Bevan.
I must tell you a personal story. I'm working on the background of a systems medicine. I mean, Gary may know James Greer Miller, and he was one of the founders of general systems theory. He was a psychiatrist. Once I met him personally, and in 2 years, I tried to publish a paper in the sense of proposal for a systems approach of systems medicine. Yeah, and in September there was the last initiative in what was it? Not Frontiers in Medicine, but we are starting right now with Frontiers in Medicine. This is the people, I think 6 people also from philosophy. Markram from the US, philosopher of medicine. Sarah Green is a philosopher of biology in Copenhagen, and so on. So we got a rejection. We were not sure. Should we write more about the principles of systems theory being applied fruitfully in particular problems in medicine, or should we refer to COVID? So we thought, okay, if it referred to COVID, we would have a slight chance to obtain attention. Now the reviewers were writing, one was saying, probably it was Dennis Noble, he said, yeah, this is a good contribution, but the other reviewer was writing, we are very angry, so to say, that these people want to tell us how to make research in COVID, so to say. So the editor is a very young lady, and she decided, after reading some parts of the manuscript, to reject it. So this is the endless story to go to high ranking journals and to propose the systems approach. And I think that if we could convince these specialists who are just looking ultra microscopically on the subject, if we could convince them that it would be more economic to bring together different points of view, as Gary was showing with his elephant metaphor, so probably we would have a chance. And I was thinking, because a big paper takes weeks and months, even a large paper, yeah, with 200 references and agreement about the style and this and that and so. And I was thinking to write a letter to the editor, a very brief one, which has very striking arguments, for instance, for Lancet, which is, okay, some people say it's open, some people say it's just conservative and not open for new ideas or new approaches. So this is the dilemma. And I think now, if we have any chance to, like Jennifer was saying, that we have any chance to publish in a group, yeah, and make this balance act between general view and specialist view, then it might be probably an approach for the large picture or the big picture. And I must say that Germany, I see the COVID discussion in a public health circle, in two circles, in the German circle and in the Austrian circle. And I see that there's no, so to say, thinking by one's own. They just say, Imperial College was publishing this and that. Oh, John Hopkins was publishing. Oh, and there's a new article in Lancet and so. There's nobody's, it's really crazy. Nobody's thinking over, and they just say, there's a new paper. And yeah. I think that there must be, this is an explosion of information, and we don't think over and try to put the things together. So
I do think that's one of the problems you have having your story heard, is that the literature is absolutely massive on COVID, and there's a massive amount of special issues and whatever being produced, and in the end you sort of feel brain dead. With people like Lancet, Kirsty and I tried them back in May with a letter to Lancet about the renin-angiotensin system and why the hell people were talking about ARBs being a bad thing in COVID. So they didn't have a bar of it. The conversation didn't have a bar of it. The media didn't want to know about the renin-angiotensin system. And now, of course, we are still in that position that we were in May, that we're fighting to give this strategy of therapeutics with the hang-on of the other side, the other drugs that you can use with it, like the statins and the bradykinin guys. You can't make way in the mess that is the scientific literature at the moment, especially with all these startup journals. So I don't know how we get a strategy going. Perhaps I'm being a bit negative, but it's very hard.
I think at the moment, because of this push for the vaccine, and it's all very big in the media at the moment about this vaccine that's coming out, it's very hard then to turn around and start talking about therapeutic when everyone's so excited about this vaccine.
And they think it's going to be 100%. Yeah.
There's going to be another battle over the next couple of months as they roll out the vaccine, because we're going to have to fight with all of that data and information.
I think there are some avenues that we might be able to pick up from other areas. For example, people in economics and business are talking about a post-COVID world, whatever that is. And perhaps one of the contributions we can make is one of saying, what has the pandemic and what has the virus illustrated to us in terms of weaknesses and also strengths, if you like, but weaknesses particularly in terms of the way we approach research, particularly in an emergency setting. And that way you can then cover those, you can go right into the need for a systems analysis across strategy.
That's a nice idea, Richard.
Yeah, and so that would be one approach. The second approach would be, I still think that we can marry the RAS system with systems analysis in a temporal sense and also in a horizontally integrated sense across disciplines in a way that no one's done. In other words, almost instead of looking at the effect of COVID on a patient, look at COVID from the standpoint of the virus and say, what does the virus see within the first minute? What does it see in the first hour? What does it see in the first day? What does it see in the first week? And what does it see in the first 2 weeks? Yeah. And then from that temporal arrangement, backfill that with the physiology, with the cell biology and the biochemistry. I don't think anyone's done that. And it's so important because just the fundamental anatomy of the lung is so complex and so important to understand, you know, what mast cells are chymase mast cells, which ones aren't chymase mast cells, chymase being a surrogate in many ways for the renin-angiotensin system, and so on and so forth. All of these things we could build into a paper that no one has ever attempted or no one's put together.
That's way cool. That's awesome. Thinking about the virus, because the medical person doesn't see it like that. But that's the problem. And
it becomes so obvious from a system standpoint. It explains quite simply why a mask works. You can start on the other side of the mask if you want.
That's really cool. I'm just aware that we've only got a few minutes. Stephen and Bevan hasn't spoken, but I hear you.
Your mic is a little bit mute, Bevan.
Can't hear you.
Bevan, can you speak up?
Yeah, your mic is very weak.
No.
No, we can hear you, but just barely.
I'm particularly interested in the long haul patients and what they're getting with chronic fatigue syndrome. And there's always been a history of people with post-viral illnesses coming down with chronic fatigue. And, I'm particularly interested in activating the NRF2 transcription factor as a drug therapy. And there are certainly repurposed compounds which can be done for this. And one way, as you said, if it can't be commercialized, it's going to be difficult. One way we could approach it is to go for the Gates Foundation, because they would be very keen to do things with generic compounds, cheap compounds. And I think the long haul COVID is going to be expanding much more throughout the world. And people will just won't know what to do about it. And I think there's an urgent need to come up with purpose compounds for doing that. And I've got ideas on it, but the question is how to go about promoting it.
Yeah, that might be the But Bevan was talking about the problem of the long-term consequences of those people who are recovering from, let's say, a severe bout of COVID. You know, the compromise that it leaves on essentially the integrity of the bodily systems. You mentioned, you know, the relationship with chronic fatigue, for instance, and you know, the weakening of the immune system longer term. I mean, I've heard of people, you know, developing, you know, autoimmune type conditions as a consequence of COVID infection. So yes, if we were to do a series of papers, maybe one of the papers we should consider would be, you know, how do we deal with that aspect of COVID in the long term? You know, how do we heal the people? Because that's what we really need to do. We need to restore them to you know, their previous condition before the COVID incident.
I have literature on it, and I'm happy to write an article for Jennifer's issue, the post-COVID situation, and drug strategies for trying to overcome any chronic fatigue or other weaknesses that the people come up with.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of parallels with those people who suffer from a sepsis attack, and how that again leaves the bodily systems compromised.
Did you hear about the massive doses of vitamin C they administered to a septic patient the other day? I don't know how many 1,000 grams they gave.
8 grams.
But it's
antioxidant.
8 grams.
Antioxidant, yeah.
I don't know, you know, I wasn't very excited by that.
Well, I was rather amazed that they didn't end up with renal calculi.
And also, he got all the right drugs and he got everything he needed. I mean, I know that anyway, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm a doubting Thomas.
But there's done more in sheep.
Well, actually, it was surprising to see Clive May promulgating it when he was a sheep doctor.
Well, he's done it in sheep and tried it in one human.
Yeah. Gary, I probably have to go at about 8:30 today. Sorry, in about 7 minutes. And so I can leave you to talk. I have just made some notes, but is everyone thinking that that we should try in the first instance pull together a series of discussions based on Felix's systems approach? And then I can maybe take that and add these other things in it from today.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think what would be good would be to give everybody the chance to give a little presentation on some of the things that they think are key of relevance. You know, to showcase, you know, certain different perspectives. This is something that we're going to have to do a few times, I think. You know, to get us all in the same kind of mind space. And understand the different contributions that we can all make, because we're all seeing things from similar but obviously different angles, and all of those different perspectives add to the greater whole.
Yep. So should I just send some thoughts around from today with Felix's stuff, and maybe we can meet again some other time this week, or
yeah. So this. Apart from Wednesday, I'm pretty good this week. You know, in the evening. I don't know how other people are fixed in the mornings. But
this works for me.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to do this again on Thursday, which would be your Friday morning for those on the other side of the globe.
I think that works for me too. So, I mean.
I could do the 7:30 caper Thursday or Friday. but depending.
Okay.
I have a health issue that might pull me out of my loop.
Well, your Friday would be best for me, because I've already got an appointment on my Wednesday evening, which is your Thursday morning. So
Yeah.
if we could do Thursday, Friday, then that would be great.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. And look, I'm not wedded to this whole themed issue. The only reason that I'm raising it is because it was raised at the editorial board meeting. They were looking for themed issues, and I thought that it just happened to be the same time as we were discussing all of this, and I thought it might be good to do that. But we might decide that that is not the right journal, and actually we need bigger impact, because the journal that I'm referring to is read by a lot of researchers, but you wouldn't get people that do policy, for example, in there reading it. So unless you published it there and then sent it somewhere else afterwards, which I guess we could do. So I just wanted to have that out there, that it was more about getting together and pulling it together rather than actually meeting for the whole purpose of just writing a review. I mean, I've written enough reviews in my life. I don't need to write any more, but I just thought it was a good way to get us thinking. So maybe if we just keep it open for now.
Would it be a good idea to produce a synopsis of what we're going to do and approach someone, dare I say, nature, or and say, look, we want a different approach to thinking about how we deal with a problem like COVID, and then using that as a sort of to see if anyone's interested, rather than actually getting down and something, putting our heads down and writing badly. We produce synopsis.
I was just thinking, could we do a letter to the editor or something first, jointly, to gauge some interest in it, and as well as a themed issue. I was in depth, but just something initially to get the ball rolling.
Well, that's good. Maybe I'll write that down when I send something around after this. I mean, Richard and I had also talked about The Economist, or another somewhere where it actually has some impact and is picked up by people that are more sort of systems thinkers in terms of how health fits into the bigger picture. So, I mean, there's Time, and there's The Guardian and Economist that are kind of quite well read as well. So maybe we can think about those approaches, or both. You're the systems thinker, Gary. So.
I'm wondering whether it might be valuable for us to maybe move a step forward before we go to a journal, and that's to map out ourselves at least the bare bones or skeleton of what we want to do, so that we're happy ourselves that we've got something really unique here, and then based on that, then move towards the journal, either your existing one or others, or both, Jenny.
Okay. Sorry, I have to go, but should I integrate Felix's systems approach with some of the additional things that we've talked about today, just in a Word doc? Would that be? That'd
be wonderful if you could.
That would be terrific.
If we could see that on Thursday, Friday, then that would be really super. That can then take the conversation forward.
Yeah, I'll do that today.
Can I say something? I would like to have really hard criticism. I don't want to have polite arguments or something like that, because I'm trained in fighting discussions. That you have a dialectics. You know Hegel and so It's antagonism and protagonism, synergism. This is my idea how knowledge evolves. And I think it might be interesting, what Richard was saying, to have, if we would be able to have something like a consensus paper, but not, nicely written, but just the arguments. Why do we think that the systems approach will be better, more efficient in the economic sense? That the monetary input and time input and personal input has more results for the for the whole, let's say, clinical treatment, even rehabilitation with the long-term disorders, you know, that are evoked by the acute COVID. So if you had something, as I heard, a skeleton, yeah, of arguments, why are we convinced that this approach would be better? This would be probably convincing, because I always get the question from the editors, yeah, why do you think you are better than we? You know, so that's a narcissistic problem. Always somehow, because you destroy the optimistic self-understanding of the micro researchers, which I was doing. I was working in brain research on a cellular level and subcellular level for several years in the Max Planck Institute. So I know going down deep, but also go back and horizontal integration of the system. So this would be a very, very good idea, that one and a half page, that would be enough. And then I feel better, because I've written so many manuscripts, and I've written about Bertalanffy and all these things, and his organismal systems biology conception, and so on. So I could find arguments, and probably also co-workers, but I think it's really good that we have a skeleton, and then we grow and grow and grow with our arguments, and maybe we can fill up a journal, a special edition, or maybe we just have a consensus for a provocative letter to the editor, yeah, from, I don't know, British Medical Journal, I don't know what, yeah. So just to fight a little bit for the broader view, which is really more productive. And I have examples with my brain research thing, but it's another story. It's time consuming. And I was demonstrating a little bit in the slides. So I would be very happy if we just could. And Denis Noble, I contacted again, and he wrote back a little bit, and he's very struggling with his downward causation, yeah. So he's focused, and he has to argue against the reductionists and saying, yeah, both is correct, reductionism and top-down. And he sent me a paper, but probably if somebody has a good connection, and we, for instance, if we make a 1.5 side long proposal, and I send it to him, or somebody of you, or we send it to him and ask him what he thinks, yeah, and if he probably would join us, yeah, that we have a little bit of pressure group, yeah, with very prominent guy in the European cultural space, so to say. He's really accepted as the systems biology with his music of life, yeah. So if we would have him on board, it would be much better for the whole, you know, for the first important impulses. So, okay.
Yeah. That might also be a useful thing to do, to put together a stakeholder map of people that we think might be allies that we could bring in.
Yeah. I think there's also I don't know, this French guy Offry, who is I could send you the names and a small list of potential proponents, but there's one problem we have with this label, systems biology, systems medicine.
Yes.
And this is
and it's
a very respected person, who has also implanted an institute in Luxembourg, which is very famous for financial transactions and so on and so forth. And so he's trying also to more or less to control the European space about the development of systems medicine in the molecular biological sense. Yeah, but they have some problems how to understand or explain the cell on the level of molecules alone. And this is the claim they have. They say, okay, systems biology bottom up and will explain everything, society, communism, capitalism, everything we can explain. And this is really not solid academic operation. And they are very influential. And the other guy is Lo Scalzo in Harvard. He has generated this network medicine together with Barabashi, who is a very nice Hungarian mathematician and complexity mathematics, let's say, graph theoretical approach. And he is incredibly active also. And he's a clinician, yeah, because Leroy Hood is just a laboratory man, which, these are probably these people who are reviewers, you know, so, and this is a decision, a basic decision. And I think they really want, as what said already, they are interested in making money. They have a conviction and or a commitment to a systems approach, but they are not very self-critical, if I want to, excuse me if I use this term, yeah, okay.
Okay, so so we've agreed we're going to do another session Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Do people want to say a few final words? Do you want to leave it where it is now, or do you want to continue the discussion for a little longer? You know, I don't mind. Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would probably be nice to leave it here, and just say a few final words, because you know, I think it's really good when all 8 of us are together. You know, and Jenny's had to go off for another meeting now. So a few final words from anyone. If everyone's okay.
Go ahead, Eugenie.
I just wanted to summarize. We have to have a strategy of producing good science. We have to have a strategy of getting it out to the public. And that might, and whether we use something like The Economist as well as the scientific papers should be discussed. And then we have the strategies of having stakeholders join us to create a force formidable that has to be heard. I mean, the big problem is, if we're going to go anywhere, we have to position ourselves that we have to be listened to.
Yes.
Not that I particularly, you know, not being sort of a opportunistic here. I'm just saying that if you want something, you've got to sell it. And I am concerned at selling anything into the world of COVID mess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Eugenie.
I'd agree, Gary. We've really come to, I think, a very good position in terms of now moving to almost a skeletal framework of where we'd want to be, and we could do that, start to do that at the next meeting. But I think the input of system sciences in this area is and complex sciences is just terrific. I think it's really the way to go.
Okay. Felix, Kirsty, happy?
Kirsty?
Okay.
Who's setting up the next Zoom? You are, Gary?
Yeah, I can set up the next one again. So same time on Thursday, Friday, yeah?
Yeah, Friday,
Yep.
I think suits me.
Okay, super. Yeah, I'll do that then.
Yep.
So for Felix and Gary, tomorrow looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Very powerful stuff. And I'm delighted that you were all able to contribute. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary, for this.
All the best.
It's
Thank
great.
you
It's
all.
great seeing some old friends again.
Bye.
Right. Bye.
Bye. Bye.